Now, I want to ask you from an IPL perspective that how important is the process of scouting, especially considering even Rajasthan Royals do have an academy, they also have their scouting process, and someone like a Chetan Sakaria was actually picked through scouting. So, how important is the scouting process? That is one. Two, while what are the qualities or what are the kind of players that you look for when you're doing domestic scouting, which is in the Indian local circuit, and what kind of players do you look for when you're scouting overseas? Because now teams have scouts even overseas as well. Because we see someone like a Marco Jensen being picked by Mumbai Indians, who really not a lot of people have heard of.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, firstly, from a Rajasthan Royals perspective, my role there is as a consultant. I'm offering often views from the outside, and there's a group of there's a scouting team and a team closer to the sort of team environment, I suppose, that do that. And I then am challenging that sometimes or providing data to supplement that work. But I mean, in simple terms, it's obviously very, very important. Scouting enables you fundamentally to identify players who other teams may not have recognized as being talented. I think that's the most important thing that scouting might achieve. And if you can do that, you then get excellent players for undervalue, and then you have more money to spend elsewhere. It's the template which served Mumbai Indians so well. The reason why they are the team that they are isn't because they have star players, it's because they've identified players quite often before they are stars. And then they've managed to secure them at lower prices that gives them more money to spend elsewhere on the players that they really need to chase. I mean, if you look back in 2013, they identified the likes of in the sort of 2013 to 15 period, Hardik Pandya, Krunal Pandya, Bumrah, guys like that. Even other guys who've gone on to play at other sides. Yuzvendra Chahal was first spotted by Mumbai. If you spot these players, buy them cheap, it then says, right, okay, Mumbai were really chased hard for Rohit Sharma. They've chased hard for Karan Pollard. They've chased hard for Lasith Malinga. They've never spent actually huge amounts of money on them, but they've been able to get those players because they've spent less money in the domestic market. So, I mean, scouting fundamentally is about finding talented players, but I think the most important thing is finding talented players who maybe other teams don't recognize as being talented. So, yeah, it's integral to success, I think. If you don't scout well, it becomes difficult to succeed because you end up having to pay a lot of money for all of your players because you're playing, you're essentially buying players who everyone is aware is good. And that's difficult with a salary cap. Then with regards to your question about Indian scouting and international scouting, I mean, I think simply speaking, I don't think there's anything different you're looking for other than talented players. If someone's good at a certain role, then you're interested in them. That said, there are certain roles that are harder to find in different markets that I think then become more important. So in the overseas market, for example, finding pace bowlers is important because there's fewer of them in India. Equally, because there are fewer in India, that means if you can find the few that are good, you'd like to get them. That's why I sort of mean it doesn't really matter about the role. You just want good players. But generally, in the IPL, you see teams focus their international recruitment on pace bowlers, on power hitters, quite often lower down the order, and possibly all rounders as well, because they're areas that in the Indian market are harder to come by. Now, but as I said, that also means that if you can find guys who fulfill those roles, for example, I mean, Shah Rukh Khan was a good example, someone who Punjab Kings picked up. He's a lower order power hitter who had only played a handful of games, but he obviously impressed in his limited experience at state level. And he's only played a few games in the IPL, but he did fairly well in his initial season and initial few games. Finding someone like that is key as well. And then also in the Indian market, often there's a lot of spinners as well. You generally don't go to the overseas market for spin bowlers, so you generally look to the Indian market for finding spinners because there's a lot of them. It's all about supply and demand. But I'd go back to the point that, to be honest, you're just looking for talented players in whatever role, and you can pull together the most talented squad you can. But there are certainly areas of international and Indian talent pools which are deeper or shallower, and that sort of drives how you operate.